I worked night security at Greystone Mansion in Beverly Hills for almost a year. When I first got the job, I thought it was a dream gig, easy money, just walking around a beautiful historic mansion. But Greystone isn't just another mansion, it's a crime scene. A murder-suicide happened there in 1929. Ned Doheny, the son of an oil tycoon, was shot dead in his own home. His secretary, Hugh Plunkett, was found beside him, the gun in his hand. Case closed. Except something doesn't add up. My first night was unsettling. Not because of anything paranormal at first, it was just too quiet. The house was huge. 55 rooms, long echoing hallways, old wooden floors that creaked when no one was there. Every so often I swore I could hear footsteps behind me, but every time I turned around, nothing. The first real thing that scared me happened around 2 a.m. I was walking near the master bedroom where Ned was shot when I heard it. I froze. There was no one else in the house. Then I heard whispers. 2 voices, men, arguing. It was coming from the locked bedroom. I stepped closer, my flashlight shaking slightly. I threw open the door and saw nothing. The room was silent, empty, but then I looked at the floor. And that's when I noticed something wrong. Footprints mysteriously appear in dust. They led straight to me, and then just stopped, like whoever made them had vanished. A week later, I was in the control room flipping through the security cameras. Most of them showed nothing, just dark, empty hallways. Then I switched to camera 7. At the top of the grand staircase, there was a man, tall, motionless, dressed in 1920s clothing. At first, I thought it was just a reflection or a shadow, but then he moved, not normally. It was a jerky, unnatural motion, like he was being puppeted. I leaned closer to the screen, and that's when I saw his face, or rather, I didn't. Because his face was blurred, like the camera couldn't focus on him.
Help me!
The screen glitched, and he was gone. One night, I was doing my rounds when I noticed something odd. The study door, a room I had locked earlier, was wide open. I walked in, my flashlight shaking slightly. Everything was exactly how it had been left, except for one thing. An old rotary phone was sitting on the desk, and the receiver was off the hook. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. There was no way that phone should have been off the hook. I reached out slowly.
He's still here.
I spun around, shining my light wildly. No one was there. I put the phone back on the hook, my hands ice cold, and then I saw it. The dust on the desk. Someone had written in it one word: murder. My last shift at Greystone was the worst. I was walking through the west wing, the part of the house I avoided. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, but not mine. They were coming toward me. I turned the corner and saw him, the same blurred man from the security footage, standing at the end of the hallway watching me. I stepped forward. He moved too, mirroring me. I stepped back. He stepped forward.
It wasn't suicide.
I ran. I never went back. A few weeks later, I was having lunch with an ex-coworker who also quit. I told him about what I saw. He paled. Then he told me his story. One night, he was walking past the library when he saw something in the window. At first, he thought it was just a reflection, but then it moved. A man standing inside the room. But here's the thing. The library door had been locked, and there was no one inside. Some people think Greystone Mansion is just another historic building, but I know what I heard, what I saw, and I'll never go backward. Because that place is still haunted, and some ghosts aren't ready to let go.
Help me.
A cursed house, a hidden corpse, and a family that should have never moved in. I was 13 years old when my family moved into Summerwind Mansion in Wisconsin. My dad had always wanted to fix up an old house, and when he found Summerwind, he thought he had hit the jackpot. Huge place, low price, right on the lake, but I didn't like it. Even during the day, the house had a way of feeling dark, like it had swallowed too many secrets over the years. The air inside was stale, like no one had lived there for a long time, even though it had been abandoned for only a few years. Something about that house just felt wrong, but I couldn't explain why, not yet. That first night I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, no creaking pipes, no humming from the fridge, just pure silence. Outside my window, the lake stretched out into the woods, covered in mist. That's when I saw something. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, but no. There was a woman standing near the shore. She wore a long white dress, her hair wet and clinging to her face. She was still, too still. Something about her posture. It was like she wasn't standing, like she was suspended. Then she looked up at me. Even from my window, I could see that her face was wrong. Not blurry, more like I wasn't allowed to see it. And then she started crying. I stumbled back from the window, my heart hammering. I called for my parents, but by the time they got to my room, she was gone. My dad told me I was just seeing things, but the next morning, the ground where she had been standing was wet, like someone had been standing there, dripping water into the dirt for hours. As the weeks went by, the house changed, or maybe it just started noticing us. Doors would slam shut on their own. Objects moved overnight. One morning, my mum swore she left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter. We searched the whole house, but it was gone. 2 days later, we found it inside the oven. No one had been near it. That same week, my dad heard footsteps upstairs while he was home alone. When he went up to check, the hallway was ice cold. The air smelled like lake water. The basement door was the worst. It wouldn't stay shut. Every night before bed, my mum made sure to lock it. Every morning it was open again. One night I woke up to my mum and dad arguing about it. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. "Mum, I locked it. I swear to God I locked it, Dad. It's an old house. Doors shift, pipes rattle. You need to relax." I leaned forward to see down the hall, and the basement door was wide open. A few seconds later, something moved down there, something small, like a rat, except I swear I heard it breathe. I started waking up at exactly 3 a.m. every single night. At first it was just a feeling, like something was standing outside my door, watching. Then one night I heard it, a whisper. I sat up in bed, frozen. I knew that voice. It was my mom's voice, but it wasn't coming from my parents' room. It was coming from outside my window. I slowly turned my head, and there, standing by the lake again, was the woman in white. Except this time, her mouth was stretched open like she was screaming, but making no sound. I dove under my blanket, squeezing my eyes shut. The whispering didn't stop until the sun started to rise. A week later, my dad was tearing out some old cabinets in the basement. That's when he found a hidden crawl space, a tiny, dark hole behind the wall. I remember hearing him call my mum down, then a second later, his voice changed, from confused to horrified. "Dad, oh my God." I ran to the basement door just as he stumbled out, pale, shaking, and in his hand a human bone. Then we heard it from inside the walls, scratching like fingernails clawing at wood. Then from nowhere we ran, we never went back. We left everything behind. Boxes, furniture, didn't matter. We packed the car and drove away that night. A few weeks later, I heard my mom on the phone. She was talking to the realtor. "Mom, no, we're not coming back. I don't care if it's still standing, except..." A few months later, it wasn't. Summerwind Mansion burned to the ground. No one knows how the fire started, but I know this. She didn't want anyone else to live there, and sometimes late at night, I swear I still hear her, crying, waiting for someone new to come inside. If you ever visit Loch Ness, you might pass by the ruins of a house that should have never been built. It was called Boleskine House. It was once owned by Aleister Crowley, one of the most infamous occultists in history. Crowley didn't just live there. He believed this land was a gateway, a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thinner. He spent months performing an elaborate and dangerous ritual, one meant to summon supernatural beings. But there's one thing about this ritual: it had to be completed. If interrupted, it would leave the door open. Crowley never finished it, and everyone who lived there after him paid the price. In the 1970s, a man named Kenneth Grant bought Boleskine House. He thought the stories were superstition. He didn't believe in demons or ghosts. At first, everything seemed normal. Then, things started changing. It began with small things. Doors open in the morning that had been locked at night, objects moving slightly, as if someone had nudged them. But then, it got worse. One night, Kenneth was alone in the library when he heard something. It came from the next room, like someone was pacing slowly. "Hello, is someone there?"
Leave.
He grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the dark hallway. There was no one there, but the floor, the dust was disturbed, as if something had been walking in circles. He turned to go back and froze. At the end of the hallway, a tall, thin figure stood in the shadows, watching, but its face wasn't human. Kenneth bolted back into the library, slammed the door shut, and pressed his back against it. That's when he heard,
You are not welcome.
The lights flickered violently. Kenneth grabbed his keys and ran out of the house. He never spent another night there. A week later, Boleskine House burned. The house was left in ruins, but the land was never cleansed. Over the years, people who visited the site reported the same things: a black shadow moving between the trees, soft, distant chanting, faint voices whispering in a language no one could recognize. One man, a tourist from England, camped near the ruins in 1999. At 2 a.m., he was woken up by the feeling of something standing over his tent. When he unzipped the flap, there was nothing there, but the outside of his tent was covered in deep, claw-like gashes. That morning, he packed his things and left immediately, but when he got home, he discovered something worse. 3 deep scratches had appeared across his chest overnight, like something had marked him. In 2015, another man bought the land, convinced the stories were just old myths. He was a skeptic, didn't believe in ghosts, didn't believe in demons, so he started rebuilding on the land. But then, things started happening. Workers refused to go near the ruins at night. They spoke of hearing whispers in empty rooms, of seeing a tall shadow watching from the tree line. But the new owner refused to stop. One night, he stayed at the site alone. He wanted to prove there was nothing to be afraid of. He set up a camera facing the ruins. He sat in his tent and recorded himself saying, "If there's anything here, show yourself." Nothing happened. Said the stories were nonsense. Then, as he played the footage back, he noticed something. At exactly 3 a.m.,
It's still here.
his tent shook violently. He dropped the camera and ran. He sold the land the next month. The land has changed hands several times since then. No one stays for long. Even after the house was rebuilt, fires continued to destroy it. The last one happened in 2019. A fire so intense the stone walls cracked. And even after all the destruction, one thing never changed. The land. The air around the ruins still feels heavy. Visitors say it's like walking through something thick, something aware, and if you stay long enough, if you listen closely, you might hear it.
Come inside.
But if you do, if you step into the ruins, you may never step out again.